Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the KOBCast, Knitting Outside the Box podcast. We're coming today from my office, and my cat just decided he wanted to say hello. So, a little 18-pound chonker. This is George Michael. Put him right here for a minute. So, today we're going to be talking about the Wislawa cowl, which is in Knitting Outside the Box 1. Okay, bye. Cats. Which is in Knitting Outside the Box 1, and it is in the chapter on short rows. And Wislawa is one that I really love because it's kind of unexpected and kind of subtle. And I don't tend to do subtle very well. So it's a favorite of mine. We're just like, oh yeah, look at that little tiny detail in there. Cool stuff. So what it does is it uses something called a flat insert short row, which I talk about in my book, to draw shapes within the structure of the fabric. So if I hold it up, let's see if my camera can catch that. There we go. See those little shapes in there? So it's this really simple 4-row garter stitch pattern, garter ridge pattern, but there are these little accents of these. Come on, little computer. There we go. So the way these work is that they are done with short rows. And I used a specific type of short rows in this. So I teach a short row class pretty frequently, both virtually and in person, if that ever happens ever again. But what happens with short rows is that a lot of times designers will use the ones they like, which is fine. That's totally legit. That's part of what being a designer is about. You get to choose what works best for you. But there are also short rows out there that work specifically with types of fabric. So if you've read Knitting Outside the Box and Knitting Outside the Box Straight and Fold, one thing you'll see is that I really love Japanese short rows. These are sometimes called coil. Coil is safety pin short rows, or clip and turn, various nomenclatures, because as far as I can tell, there is actually no provenance that makes them Japanese from people that I've talked to. They're just like, yeah, we don't know where this comes from. So that's one that I really love. I think it makes an absolutely beautiful edge on stockinette fabric. Super gorgeous. But the way that it works is by drawing excess ease out of your existing fabric. Okay, so rather than doing a wrap and turn or doing a yarn over where you are adding a loop to your fabric, you're pulling it out from the fabric itself. This is fantastic in stockinette because it means that you keep that smooth tension of the stockinette on your fabric. Awesome. We love that. If you're doing anything other than stockinette, though, if you're doing anything that has any sort of positive ease to it or any sort of drape to it, they can be a bit tight. So after all of this time of me going through these two books and going, okay, Japanese short rows, Japanese short rows, Japanese short rows, Japanese short rows, I chose wrap and turn for this. And I wanted to talk to you today a little bit of why. So the way that both short rows work and Wislawa itself works is that you are creating an insert within a piece of flat fabric. So especially for this type, the flat insert, and again, I go into all of the details of different types of short rows within the book itself, but with this type of flat insert, the metaphor that I tend to use is think of dropping a rock into a shallow stream. Okay, so what that does is it diverts the water around that rock. You have that central piece, and then the water flows on either side. Let's see if I can get my hands to go in the same direction. There we go. The flat insert in short rows does the exact same thing. It creates an insert in your fabric, and then the rows are flowing around it. So you create this beautiful shape within the structure of your fabric. What this does, though, is it changes the dimension of what would typically be a flat row. So when we look at, and let me get one of these up again so you can see the light through it. So when we look at one of these guys, you can see the row on top here. See how curved that is in comparison to the straight stockinette next to it, right? Normal straight stockinette. oh look, it's doing a big curvy row now. So what that means is that your fabric needs to have a little bit more ease in it than you typically would. Wrap and turns do that. They help with that. And what they do is that they add ease to your fabric. So previously when I was talking about Japanese short rows, they take ease from your fabric. Super cool. Love that. But sometimes it's not appropriate. So wrap and turns add ease to your fabric. When you do a wrap and turn, what you're doing is you are creating a loop of yarn around the wrapped stitch, right? You move the yarn, you slip the stitch, you move the yarn, you slip the stitch, you end up with that kind of collar sitting around your wrapped stitch. That yarn is sitting in the connection between the end of the row below and the beginning of the row above, all right? So when we do that, we are taking a little loop of yarn on the side of our fabric, and that becomes our wrap. We are adding yarn to our fabric. We are adding ease to our fabric. So anytime you do a wrap and turn or a yarn over short row, what you're doing is you are adding ease to your fabric. So that's why I wanted to use it in Wislawa to make sure that I was able to get around those curves smoothly. Now you can play with it even further if you want to. And one of the things I talk about in my short row classes and in the book is that if a pattern calls for a specific type of short row, you can do what you want. Like think about the reasons why and the logic behind why the designer has chosen to use that particular short row. And if you can't discover a particular logic, then use your own logic, you know? So for here, I wanted extra ease in there. Well, there are a couple other short rows that do that. Yarn over short rows do that. Shadow wraps do that. German short rows sometimes do that, depending on how hard you tug them. So I could have used any of those if I had wanted to. Wrap and turn worked the best with the structure of this fabric, so that's what I went with. But you have options. You also get to do this really cool thing, and I actually did this on the sample for Wislawa because I'm wild and I don't follow rules very well. I did 2 different types of short rows on the right side and on the wrong side of my row. You can do that. It's okay. I did wrap and turn on one side, and of course the pattern instructions are written for normal people who will do the same type on either side. But when I did it, I find that when I am resolving my wrong side short rows on the next go around, so on this one you're drawing, you go boop, 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 and then you swoop down and finish the right side. And as you come around on the next round, that's when you resolve the wrong side ones. When I was doing that with my regular wrap and turn short rows, they were noticeably tighter than my right side wrap and turn short rows. So I went looser. I did a yarn over short row there. Because why not? It got me what I needed. It made the tension match perfectly. And it meant that I was working with my fabric rather than trying to get my fabric to work with me. As knitters, I feel like the fabric should be in charge, you know, because we're spending so much time making this thing. And we work so hard to get gauged, and we work so hard to put the yarn together and the fabric and all that. Let's go with that. Let's honor that. Use the skills that you have to make that work. So a little bit about why I chose to do what I did in Wislawa. So Wislawa is named for a Polish poet named Wislawa Szymborska. I'm Polish background. My mom's side of the family is Polish. Wislawa also happens to be my husband's favorite poet, so I felt like it was a really good match for the book. And it is knit up in Shibui Pebble, which is it's my desert island yarn. I absolutely love this yarn. It's hard to see the color in this light, but it is a combo of wool, silk, and cashmere, I think, in this really beautiful twist. It's beautiful doubled, it's beautiful single. I'm absolutely in love with it. I would knit with it for the rest of my life if I could. Highly recommend. Oh, and one last thing. I have a mea culpa for you. So you know, last episode when I was talking about Viognier this and Viognier that and Madame Viognier and all that sort of stuff, it took about 10 minutes after I had hit publish and got all of the content up to realize that I was talking about a different pattern. I spent the entire episode talking about the gray pullover and not the Viognier shrug. Best laid plans. So, apologies for that. All through the previous episode, just anytime I say V&A, just think gray in your head. G-R-E-S, gray. Not V&A. We'll talk about V&A at a later date. Brains are a funny thing, but I really appreciate you sticking with me on this. And many, many thanks to the people who were like, I don't think that's right. And me being like, yeah, no, you're correct, because I messed up. But such is the fun of producing a podcast all on your own with no fact checkers. You can just say the darndest things. Anyway, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week knitting. Enjoy that last sunshine before the proper fall starts. And yeah, happy knitting, everyone.